You're listening to the HawgBeat Hour with Andrew Hutchinson, Alex Trader, and Mason Choate on ESPN Arkansas and HitThatLine.com. Now, here's your host, Mason Choate.
Welcome into the HawgBeat Hour. Arkansas is 6-3, guys. I'm Mason Choate. He's Andrew Hutchinson, and he's Alex Trader. Let's just go ahead and get into it because we got a packed episode today. We're talking Mississippi State, we're talking LSU, we're talking recruiting, we're talking basketball, everything you want to know about Arkansas athletics. So we can't waste time here at the beginning. So Arkansas beats Mississippi State 31-28. I learned my lesson. I put 23-21 in a story. I was focused on basketball, but it was 31-28. Hutch, just like if Mississippi State doesn't miss 3 field goals, does Arkansas win that game, you know?
No, they don't. It honestly reminded me of the 2006 Alabama game with Lee Tiffin missing all those field goals and extra points for Alabama. That's kind of a blast from the past. But yeah, I don't think Arkansas wins that game without the help from the kickers. They did use 2 different kickers, so it wasn't just one guy. But yeah, you got to feel for the kid. I would never, if I ever have a son, I would probably never let him be a kicker because it's just way too much stress. But goodness gracious, Arkansas caught a break. You're not used to seeing that. Usually it's the other way around. But Arkansas caught a break and got a very big win to get to bowl eligibility.
And one of the biggest things towards that victory for Arkansas was on the offensive side of the ball there at the end of the game. You saw KJ Jefferson look poised on that last drive. I think Sam Pittman used the word poised like 10 times in the press conference describing KJ Jefferson. So Alex Trader, I just want to ask you, KJ Jefferson, he's really turned into a quarterback that's not just like athletically gifted, but he's someone that you can rely on to drive you down the field and win a game.
Yeah, he's come a real long way since the first half of that Rice game. You know, you had calls for him to be benched on Twitter, anywhere you look, and then now you see that run everywhere. The run to close out the game, you know, as you're watching it, you're just thinking, no, 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 no. And then he slips through, and then it's yes, yes, yes. I can't believe that just happened. It's just those type of plays are what sets apart, you know, kind of game manager quarterbacks and guys who are actually going to be able to elevate their team and help them grow into what Arkansas has really become, which is a pretty solid team in the SEC, a team that's going to be able to contend, maybe not for a championship, but for that middle of the pack, that top 3 in the SEC West. It's been really impressive to see it. And you also saw a lot of times earlier in the year, he'd kind of just throw a ball and it would end up intercepted at least once or twice a game where there was no business with that pass being thrown. And you really didn't see much of that at all this week or the last couple of weeks.
And then also on that last drive, the game-winning touchdown from Dominique Johnson, and then they punch it in for the 2-point conversion with Dominique Johnson, and it kind of left you thinking, like, where was that play against Ole Miss? But they did it against Mississippi State. It worked. And Hutch, Dominique Johnson gets the start, goes for 107 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, I don't think he's going to be like the workhorse guy, but he's got to be the clear number 1 now.
Yeah, they finally have him listed as the number 1 running back on the depth chart. He got 17 carries. I think he had previously only had as many as 6. So quite the increase, almost tripled his previous high. And then, this is something Sam Pittman has been saying has to happen. We have to get Dominique Johnson more carries. We have to get him more carries. And never happened. And I know some people were in the I'll believe it when I see it category. And you saw it this past weekend. They went to him quite a bit, and he did not disappoint. He averaged, I think it was like, 6 yards a carry, something like that. It was not quite as good as he was going into the game, which was the number 1 SEC running back in yards per carry, but he still was pretty good. And to get 107 yards on still 17 carries isn't a whole lot. You know, you see some running backs across the country getting 20, 25, 30, 35 carries in a game. And we're not going to see that because you do have Rocket Sanders. You do have Traylon Smith still. I'm not sure what A.J. Green's role is going to be these last 3 games outside of maybe returning kicks or whatever. But you've got enough to where you don't have to just solely rely on him. But I think he's going to be your guy getting the carries when it matters most.
I want to stick on the offensive side of the ball before we go over to defense. I mean, Treylon Burks, it's just every game, you get the ball to him and great things happen. And it's almost like, does it feel to you guys like maybe Traylon Burke should touch the ball even more than he already is? Because he does, like, even if he's covered, he does great things. I mean, Hutch, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Sam Pittman said it the week going into the Mississippi State game that we've got to get him the ball more, and that he was leading the SEC in receiving yards. So it's kind of crazy to think, but I do agree with him. You got to get him the ball. You can't just only throw it to him on deep, even though that works. 50-50 balls are probably more like 80-20, whatever Traylon Burks is involved, especially when KJ Jefferson throwing the ball. But get it to him in space on short passes, screens, having him carry it out of the backfield. We saw him line up as a Wildcat quarterback at one point and gained a nice chunk of yards on that play. He threw a pass against Mississippi State, didn't complete it. It was there. Had he completed it, it would have been a touchdown, and that would have been even more incredible. But yeah, he is just an incredible, incredible talent. And I finally bit the bullet this week and say, you know what? I'm going to say it. He's the best wide receiver in Arkansas history. I don't feel bad about saying it either. I really believe it, and we really need to enjoy these last 3 regular season games and hopefully a bowl game with him, because I think we're going to be watching him on Sundays next year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that you're super far off by saying that, so don't feel bad for saying that Traylon Burks is the best wide receiver in Arkansas history. But speaking of pass catchers, Trey Knox, especially on that last drive. I mean, Alex, you've been a believer in Trey Knox for a while. I kind of quit believing in him, but it's like, okay, well, here's the Trey Knox that we saw freshman year, like a guy that's a great pass catcher. Do you think here in the later half of the season, do you think that Trey Knox is going to continue to see more play time? Because we've heard Sam Pittman say it, but it seems like KJ Jefferson and him, they kind of have a connection going as well.
Absolutely. You saw him in media this week, and Trey was saying that he was feeling more comfortable with the position. He was finally kind of clicking into what his role needs to be on the offense. He said he likes doing the blocking stuff. And from my view, he's done a pretty good job of handling the blocking duties of the tight end. But I think it's one thing to do it against UAPB in the second half when you're up by 40 points, and it's another to be the guy that's getting the ball on the game or the go-ahead drive at that point. It's really been remarkable kind of how far he fell at the start of this season and then what he's been able to do since then. I think it's really impressive. And I think he is going to play that major role going down the stretch of Arkansas, but wants to go ahead and, maybe close out with 2 or 3 against this tough end of the season slate.
Now, going into that Mississippi State game, one of the biggest things for Arkansas was pass coverage on the defensive side of the ball. They had struggled the previous 2 SEC games. They made it a focus in practice over the bye week. And I would say that they looked improved. Like Miles Slusher looked good. The secondary looked okay, aside from, I guess, that last drive that Mississippi State had. But Hutch, I want to ask you, like, these young guys seem to have stepped up when they needed to. And it was, I mean, like we heard it a lot on Saturday, but it was the bend, don't break mentality, and it worked.
Yeah, I think at one point, Jaden Johnson, the true freshman, making a second start at nickel, got burned on a play. That was really, other than that, they didn't really hit too many deep passes on Arkansas. And I think that's probably what you wanted against the Mississippi State. You didn't want to give up the big, deep balls like we saw that really hurt them against Ole Miss, hurt them in some other games. I think Auburn hit some with Bo Nix. You didn't want to give up those big plays. You wanted to make them earn everything they got, and they did. They rallied to the ball. They tackled pretty well on those short passes. So I think the defense did enough. They held them to 28 points, and yeah, they did miss the 3 field goals. That probably helped. And then obviously Grant Morgan came down with his second career interception. That was a cool moment. That was a big play to keep them off the board because they were already in field goal range. Who knows if they would have made it, but who knows, they may have scored a touchdown on that drive. That was huge. So I think the defense did enough, just barely, but enough to come away with the win.
I want to ask you guys about the pass rush because it seemed like Will Rogers had so much time back there every single time he dropped back. And it was just like you're begging Arkansas to blitz. And the 3-man rush, they did get to Will Rogers 3 times on the day, I believe, which was one of my bold predictions. Don't want to brag or anything, but it happened. But it did not feel like those were like legit sacks. It was just like he took forever and he went down. And so I guess just Hutch does Arkansas need to blitz a little bit more? Do they need to send a little bit more pressure, or are they just going to rely on their pass coverage?
You know, I think in this past game against Mississippi State, not blitzing was not a bad thing because that's what they're going to feast on. There, if you're going to blitz, you're going to leave open a hole and they're going to find it and they're going to get a 5-yard pass. And so you don't want to give that up. I like that. Now, I think they should blitz a little bit more against like an LSU, especially if they're going to have that true freshman quarterback in there. We'll talk about that later, but I think they should. I think they should have, maybe blitzed some more in some other games. Matt Corral at Ole Miss kind of struggled whenever Arkansas did blitz. They didn't do it much, but he did kind of. That's where he struggled some. So maybe we see a little bit more coming down the stretch. Maybe we see it some more definitely against Alabama because it seemed to have a lot of success for LSU this past weekend, but who knows? So yeah, I wasn't too upset about it against Mississippi State, but I'm anxious to see if they do dial up some more blitzes as we go down these last 3 games.
I mentioned his name earlier, but Miles Slusher kind of filling in the position of Jalen Catalon at safety. Alex, I want to ask you, what do you think of Slusher so far? He's talked about, Catalon's kind of been in his ear, telling him, do this, do that, encouraging him, trying to help him out. Have you seen Slusher improve since he's kind of been thrown into that starting safety role that Catalon was in?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, having that veteran mindset, having a guy who's probably going to be in the NFL draft this year, give you those pointers is always a plus if you're a young guy coming in. But I think you saw him get burnt early against UAPB. You've seen him kind of get hit a little bit, get picked on a little bit throughout the season. And like Hutch was saying, I think, 417 yards against an air raid offense, that's going to happen. That's just how the air raid works, passing. I think this will be a far more kind of true to size test of what this Razorbacks secondary has been able to become over the past couple of weeks.
So some people were saying that the Mississippi State game was a must-win game. Well, Arkansas won it. They're 6-3. They're favored against LSU this weekend, and then they got Alabama and Missouri going on. But you're bowl eligible now, and that's a big thing. And you beat a team that you were supposed to beat on your home turf. So later on in the episode, we're going to talk about the LSU game. We're going to talk about some basketball. But coming up next, we're going to talk some recruiting. We got Alex, the recruiting expert. He's been talking to all those guys. He's going to tell you all you need to know about that here on the HawgBeat Hour.
You're listening to the HawgBeat Hour with Andrew Hutchinson, Alex Trader, and Mason Choate on ESPN Arkansas and HitThatLine.com.
All right, back here on the HawgBeat Hour, I'm your host, Mason Choate, alongside Andrew Hutchinson and Alex Trader, the recruiting expert over at HawgBeat.com. So Arkansas got a commitment from Braylon Russell, running back out of Hot Springs Lakeside on Saturday evening. Alex, just fill us in. You did a film breakdown. I watched that first play. I mean, knocked a dude's helmet off. This is a talented guy for just a sophomore in high school.
He really is. And I about knocked my microphone off my desk when I saw that. I threw my hands up. I did not know. I mean, I was not expecting that. Usually I'll screen the first couple plays to make sure it's going to be a high quality highlight tape, able to get everything going. This one I didn't check out before. I just kind of went with it. Caught me off guard, but that's really what, if you watch the film, that's what he likes to do. He likes to go right at people. There was a wide open touchdown on one of the plays, and he cuts it back and runs into someone just to deliver a boom. Maybe not necessarily quite as practical at the next level, but in high school, if you can do it and you're just a sophomore, you might as well go out there and kind of put that on film and let coaches see that. I think what's really impressive is he's got the speed. He's able to run people over. If there's not a hole, he kind of would make a hole. But he's also going out there. He's catching passes out of the backfield. He's hitting a couple blocks. He had one pass where he went out deep and was able to come down with it. So just a really, really special talent at running back. 6'2", 225 as a sophomore. Huge, just true, like right now, SEC running back size. So I'm really, really interested to see what Russell can become in the next couple of years.
Yeah, you mentioned that size, and a lot of people, when he committed, we're talking like this guy would be a great linebacker at Arkansas. So I'm curious to see what happens with that, because of course they're recruiting him as a running back. But Hutch, you had the opportunity to talk to him. What did you hear from him? His visit, he visited against for the Mississippi State game. So did he talk about that? Just fill us in on that.
Yeah, I mean, he was there. He actually committed, I believe he said about an hour before the game, then announced it afterward. I think it was actually one of his teammates who kind of broke the news, because I think Braylon's phone died or something like that during the game, and so one of his teammates actually tweeted it out. And it wasn't until Sunday that Braylon actually posted about it. So kind of a funny story there. And I asked him about that, possibly playing another position. He said that he plays defensive line in high school. He also does a little bit of special teams. But I asked him if he was maybe going to do that in college, or if they were just recruiting him as a running back. He said just running back. So sounds like right now the plan is for him to play running back. But who knows how that changes. I mean, if he develops and puts on, if he comes at Arkansas and he's, 6'3", 240 or something like that, or 250, depending on how much he develops and grows. I don't know. I mean, maybe he's just a bigger Dominique Johnson, or maybe he converts to linebacker or defensive end or something like that. That's going to be really interesting to watch. You just never know. He's 2024. He's a sophomore. I mean, who knows what he's going to look like in a couple of years whenever he actually signs with Arkansas. But solid pickup for Arkansas for sure. I think he's one of only 9 players in the 2024 class for anywhere that have committed to a school so far, according to the Rivals database. So getting really early, an early start for the class. I believe I've got 20 classes now where I know who the first player was to commit. This is the earliest the player has committed over that 20-year span. So pretty incredible, and a solid pickup for Arkansas at a very early stage.
Yeah, yeah, and so Arkansas stays hot recruiting in state. I mean, Isaiah Satania commits last week. Then you get Braylon Russell this week. There's some good visitors coming in. Alex, just tell us about what's going on with recruiting and some of the players that are going to be visiting Arkansas.
Yeah, I think Sam Pittman had mentioned a couple weeks ago that it was great having everyone coming in, and this was a huge recruiting weekend for the team. But also that Missouri game in December, he really honed in on that, or later on, he really honed in on that one and wanted to make sure, like, hey, this is when we need to get people in here. We need to make sure that people are seeing how this team finishes out. But what we did see this weekend was Hutch was able to talk to DJ Lagway. I got to talk to a 6'7", 345-pound offensive tackle who, interestingly enough, didn't have his sophomore season. So his only offer is Texas, but he just picked up a 4-star rating for the class of 2023. I don't expect that single offer to last too long. Been talking to the Arkansas staff more. That'll be really interesting to follow, as well as another 4-star in the class of 2024, King Joseph Edwards. Our national guy, Ryan Wright, was able to talk to him. I was also able to reach out to him last night and get some more information, a little bit more, specific to what this visit was, where Arkansas sits with him. So make sure you check that out on HawgBeat a little bit later today, hopefully, or maybe early tomorrow. But tons of great stuff coming out of this weekend. There was a bunch of guys from Bentonville West there. A lot of the in-state guys who had an ability to make it this weekend were in town.
Yeah, and then of course this week was National Signing Day. A lot of big commitments, not just in football, but you saw it all across Arkansas athletics, basketball signings, softball signings. I mean, softball has the #1 recruiting class in the country, guys. And then cross country, volleyball. Like there's a lot of great things going on campus. Going on campus at the University of Arkansas. Now, for you radio people, if you want to hear us talk about Arkansas basketball, that's what we're about to do. But you're going to have to go to HawgBeat YouTube or HawgBeat.com and check that out. That's a little bonus content thing. If you go check it out there. But for you radio people, that's going to wrap up this segment. And now we're going to talk basketball, guys. So Arkansas defeats Mercer in the season opener. And I mean, in Arkansas fashion this year, at least, they were down by double digits in the first half. So, I mean, we've kind of seen that with Eric Musselman teams. It takes time for them to kind of groove together. Of course, you bring in all these new players, all these new transfers and freshmen, and It takes time. But the most important thing is that Arkansas got the win, Hutch, and that's just what you want to see. If they're going to go down double digits, you want to see them come back and get the victory at the end of the day, because we know by the end of the season they'll be working well together.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible, really, when you think about it. Last year, that was kind of the team's calling card, was falling down by double digits and coming back and winning. And that's what they did in all three of their NCAA tournament wins. And now here we are, the 2021-22 season, and they fell down by 10 in the first half. They trailed by 8 at halftime, and then came back and won by 13. So kind of what you've come to expect from an Eric Musselman coach team. But you're right. Getting a win is the most important thing, because there are going to be growing pains. They're still trying to figure things out. Eric Musselman is trying to figure things out, the rotation, who's going to start. I mean, he started one starting lineup against Mercer, and he's already said he's going to make at least one, if not multiple, changes to the starting lineup for the game against Gardner-Webb on Saturday. So it's still a work in progress, to say the least. And I do think they're going to figure it out, because they have a ton of talent on this team. It's just a matter of figuring out where the pieces fit.
Yeah, I think it was a bit of a surprise, at least for me, that KK Robinson was thrown into that starting lineup. But I want to ask you, Hutch, I don't know if it was you, but I saw someone tweet it. Is JD Notae this year's Mason Jones? What do you think about that? Because, I mean, he scores 30. It seems like, I mean, we kind of saw this at times last year. He was the go-to scorer for Arkansas when they needed points, but I think that's even more this year. Would you say?
Yeah, that was my tweet. And yes, I could see that happening. You probably don't want it to happen, because you want some of the other guys. Like, we didn't see Stanley Amude score very much, and he was a guy that averaged 20 plus last year at South Dakota. He's not going to average 20 plus at Arkansas, but you'd like to think he could give you, 10, 12, 13 points every night. And we just didn't see it against Mercer. He missed some shots. He couldn't quite finish at the rim a couple of times. You'd like to see a more scoring punch out of Devo Davis, who didn't even take a shot. I think that was probably the most surprising thing from that game, in my opinion, and struggled on the offensive side with 5 turnovers. So Jaylen Williams will probably become a better scorer as the season goes on. I think he only had 4 points. So other guys are going to score, so you're not going to have to rely on JD Notae. But JD Notae is a guy that can go get a bucket at any given time. He's never seen a shot he didn't like, which I think sometimes drives Eric Musselman crazy. He's talked about him working on the logo shots and things like that. But I do think he's capable of being that, big time scorer who, there's a chance I could see legitimately him winning SEC Player of the Year like Mason Jones did. But again, you don't want him scoring 30 points or taking 24, 26 shots, however many it was, every night, because that's probably not a winning recipe. But if you could kind of hone it in and make him more efficient, and maybe he gets you 18 or 20 every night, then that could bode well for Arkansas.
And then another impact player during that game was Audis Toney. I mean, he puts up a double-double, 18 points, 11 rebounds. I mean, this is a guy that he flies into the rebound to get the rebound, and it's just like he's everywhere on the glass. And he's only like 6'6", I believe. So, Alex, I mean, do you think that Toney can kind of fill in that role? Maybe at, I don't know if they would throw him at the 5 spot, but the role of Justin Smith last year, not that big of a guy, but he's going to be your go-to guy on the boards.
I certainly do think it's important to have a guy, whether it's him or not. In the era of small ball, you're not always going to want to have a Connor Vanover out there going out and just being tall and being able to get rebounds. If you can have that athleticism of, maybe a forward-sized guy who's able to go and out rebound people, that's huge. And we saw the other night. I think he has the potential to do that. It's a matter of, continuing as the season goes on, figuring out where he fits the best on this team. And kind of like Hutch said, honing in that starting lineup, getting your 5 guys that you want to send out there and being confident in that and being able to go out and continue to not just come back and win the game by double digits, but start the game strong and keep rolling through that.
We saw in the first half that one of the biggest issues for Arkansas was that the 3-point defense was just so soft. I mean, Mercer was just throwing up wide open threes left and right, and they were a good 3-point shooting team, so they were going in. So, Hutch, I want to ask you, like, what does Arkansas have to do? Are they just going to have to practice with weights on every practice, or I mean, what do they got to do to tighten up this defense? I mean, we know Eric Musselman's going to get things under control, but that seems to be a glaring issue throughout the first two exhibitions in the first game of the season.
Yeah, I mean the 3-point defense against North Texas in the exhibition was really really good because North Texas is a really good 3-point shooting team and they really did a good job. But against the D2 team before that and then against Mercer, it wasn't. And Eric Musselman mentioned it on I guess it was Wednesday with his press conference that they've just been up and down. Like they fix one thing and another issue pops up. They fix a 3-point shooting defense against North Texas, and then rebounding. They just can't rebound worth a darn. Then they fixed the rebounding issue against Mercer, and lo and behold, looky there, they can shoot threes again. So it's just a matter of getting everything figured out. Eric Musselman pointed to like the 3 transfers that played a lot: Chris Likes, Stanley Amude, and Adis Toney. Those guys have to learn the principles of that 3-point defense, and they're still learning that. And I think once they get a firm grasp on it, then it's gonna help out Arkansas's defense, and it's gonna be just fine. Because the guys that have been here, Devo Davis, JD Note, Jaylen Williams, those guys played really good defense. I mean, just excellent defense. JD Note had 7 steals. It was incredible. Those guys did well. It's just a matter of those new guys that play a lot coming on and learning the system.
Now, before we wrap up this basketball segment, Hutch, I kind of want to ask you about Jaylen Williams. He's a guy who can be really good for Arkansas. It just seems like he can't stay healthy. And then you saw against Mercer, at least in the first half, I mean, he was diving for balls, fell down, hurt his back a little bit. We know he had some back spasms as well. I mean, does that worry you, the injury issues? I mean, does he play a little too loose where, he's allowing himself to get hurt more often? What does he have to do to kind of keep himself on the court?
Yeah, I mean, you do have to worry about the injuries, considering several have popped up, and he missed the second exhibition game because of back spasms, like you mentioned, and he did take a hard fall. But he's a tough guy. I want him to keep playing the way he plays because that's what makes him so special. I mean, he scored 4 points, yeah, but he had a huge impact on that game. He had 5 assists. He was the top assist guy on the team, despite not really handling the ball. He did a really good job finding cutters. He rebounded well. I think he had 8 rebounds, and that was with him still not being back in full shape. I mean, Eric Musselman talked about it. He's got to get back into really good shape really fast because they need him on the court. He's 6'10". He's the best big man. We didn't see Connor Vanover. Don't expect to see him a ton, but yeah, he is a vital piece on this team, and he just has to stay healthy. A part of that's just a matter of luck because you don't want him changing the way he plays the game for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you saw that one pass where he threw it all the way down the court. And I think he tweeted at Arkansas football. He's been watching some Traylon Burks and KJ Jefferson film on that one. So, yeah, I agree with what you say. You don't want him to change it because that's his identity as a player. That's what makes him so good. But that's going to wrap it up for Hoops Action. Coming up next, Hutch is going to talk to Julie Bodwin of TigerDetails.com. Learn everything you need to know about LSU, and then we're going to talk about LSU right after that to wrap up the show here on the HawgBeat Hour.
You're listening to the HawgBeat Hour with Andrew Hutchinson, Alex Trader, and Mason Choate on ESPN Arkansas and HitThatLine.com.
Welcome back to another edition of Know the Foe. I'm Andrew Hutchinson, the managing editor of HawgBeat.com, your Arkansas site in the Rivals Network. After a big win over Mississippi State, the Hogs are ranked once again, checking in at number 25 in the latest CFP rankings. And now they hit the road for another big game in Baton Rouge against the LSU Tigers. With that, it's time once again to go behind enemy lines for some insider perspective on that upcoming game. Julie Bodwin covers the Tigers for TigerDetails.com, the LSU site in the Rivals Network. So she was kind enough to give us some time today. Julie, appreciate it. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on, Andrew. I'm excited to see what this game in Baton Rouge is going to look like. It's been a while since Arkansas has gotten it done in Baton Rouge, but I think they have a legitimate chance this year.
Yeah, I think so too. But before we dive into that game, I want to get kind of a big picture question for you.
Okay.
What the heck is going on down in Baton Rouge right now? I know just 2 years ago they were having one of the best seasons ever, and now here we are. Ed Orgeron's on his way out. What is going on from your perspective there on the ground?
Man, what's not going on, really? I think if I could pinpoint it, then I'd be in a much better, a much higher paying job position. I don't know if I can put my finger on it. Honestly, I don't know if LSU and Ed Ogeron and Scott Woodward, I don't know if they can put their finger on it. There's, from roster turnover to injuries. Last year we saw a lot of opt-outs, the 5-5 season last year. It kind of felt like that could have been COVID related, but now we're seeing that it's not necessarily COVID related. There was a lot of turnover after that 2019 year. A lot of guys went on to the league. They had a lot of staff take changeover. So it's a lot of things. I don't think you can put your finger on one thing. And it's kind of become the result of what you're seeing. Ed Ogeron is going to wrap up this coaching career at LSU in the next 3 games, and then he's on his way out in Baton Rouge, and there's going to be a new coach down here in a couple of weeks. We don't know who that's going to be just yet, but I don't think you can put your finger on it. I think it's a lot of things, and it's certainly not what anybody expected to start this season because there's so much talent in Baton Rouge. But yeah, injuries have really, really hurt the team this year.
Yeah, that's going to lead me right in my next question. It seems like that's been a huge story this year. I think something like 13 starters or something like that. What's the latest on the Tigers injury situation? Are there anybody coming back or any more players out for this week?
Yeah, I was before we started recording this, I was telling you kind of this worked out because it is Wednesday night when we're filming this. So Ed Ogeron just wrapped up his weekly radio show, and he just revealed that another starter is lost for the season, and Chasen Hines, who is an offensive lineman, he's lost for the season. And then Ed Ingram, who starting this year was considered to probably be their best offensive lineman. He's going to definitely be out for Arkansas. We'll see what happens the rest of the way. But yeah, about 13 players. It sounds about right. Players who've started a handful of games this year. Mason Smith, who was the #1 player for Rivals last year, he's got a right leg injury. He missed the Alabama game. In fact, he didn't even travel with the team last week to Alabama. He's going to miss this game. There is some potential that he could come back for the Texas A&M game, which is the last game of the year for LSU, but we'll have to see. He might be the only one that jumps out that might be able to make it back this year. But yeah, injuries, 13 starters, that's a lot. It's hard to overcome.
Yeah, and I know earlier this week too, Coach O kind of made some headlines when he revealed, at least to me, a surprising development with the quarterback situation that Max Johnson is still the starter, but sounds like true freshman Garrett Nussmeier is also going to be getting significant reps this week. Did that surprise you at all? And how do you see that kind of playing out?
I don't know if I was surprised by it. Max Johnson, he struggled in the game against Alabama. He held on to the ball a little too long, and Ed admitted that. And obviously everybody kind of struggles against Alabama because they've been so successful over the years. And he is only a sophomore. And so he does still have the room for the growth and things that he does have to get better at. But kind of like you said, you were surprised, he's up at the top in most of the statistics, especially in the SEC. He's not necessarily losing games for them. But I think Nussmeier, he brings a different kind of juice to the team. He's much more mobile than Max. He brings a spark. And I think that we're going to see that against Arkansas. They're splitting reps this week in practice, 50-50. Basically Ed Ogeron basically said whoever is the goes out there in the game on Saturday, and whoever's playing the best is who's going to stay out there on the field the longest. So at this point, you really don't have anything to lose, right? Like, give the youngster a shot. They've seen sparks, so why not give him a shot?
And sticking on that offensive side of the ball, you mentioned injuries earlier. One of those guys was Keyshawn Butte, the star wide receiver, put up huge numbers. He's out now. I'm curious who else on that side of the ball are people Arkansas should be aware of on that side of the ball, and what are their strengths? What do they do well?
Who should Arkansas fans be watching as far as receivers go for LSU?
Just offensive playmakers, whether it be receivers, running backs, tight ends.
Yeah.
Who should they be keeping an eye on?
Look, obviously you can't replace a star receiver like Keyshawn Butte. I mean, when it is time for him to go to the league, he is going to be a first-round draft pick. There's no doubt in my mind that is going to be what happens for him. But the only positive side of this is LSU is stacked in the wide receiver department. Now, I'm saying that, but those receivers are all freshmen. They don't really have that, the playing experience. They haven't really had as much playing time with the quarterbacks because they're freshmen, but Jack Best jumps out. He's a hybrid. He plays a little receiver, a little tight end. Malik Neighbors, another freshman out of Lafayette, Louisiana. He can go up and get the ball. We've seen flashes from him. We've seen another freshman right outside of Baton Rouge from Walker, Brian Thomas Jr. And then as far as running backs go, Ty Davis-Price, he's kind of really come on the last couple of weeks. He had a 100-yard rushing game last week against Alabama, which is kind of hard to do. So, they really, really want to get that running game going. It'll be very interesting to see now with these latest two offensive linemen out, how that may or may not change the game plan. But I would say those are a couple of names that I'd be on the lookout for.
Now, flipping over to the defensive side, how was LSU able to contain Alabama so well last week? And is that something sustainable that they could use this week against Arkansas and the rest of the season?
It's interesting because that's certainly not what any of us expected. They came out, they really used that bye week for what it's for. They changed some things around defensively. They put in, I want to say Ogeron said they put in like 8 different defensive schemes, plays, however you want to word it. And then they blitzed. They blitzed more in that Alabama game than they have blitzed the rest of the season combined. Durante Jones, who's the first-year defensive coordinator, it doesn't seem like he's a blitzing kind of guy. We haven't seen much blitzing. It's been something that the fans, especially on our message board, has talked a lot about is where's the blitzes. But against Alabama, that changed, and they came after Bryce Young, and it showed. Obviously, the score showed. LSU came up just short. Honestly, if you go back and you really watch that game, they left some things out on the field. They probably should have won that game. Is it sustainable? I don't know, only because of the injuries. Their entire secondary is just depleted. What we saw out there was second and third string guys. And I don't know if it's sustainable for the last 3 games of the season, quite honestly. Once you show your hand, the other teams will start to figure it out. So because it was something new and something that they hadn't done, maybe that caught Alabama off guard of sorts. So we'll see this week. I'm really unsure of how this defense is going to look this week. And I'm sure they'll stick to some of the blitzing, but I don't think we'll see it as much as what we saw against Alabama.
And something I always like to ask the people who cover these teams is if you're an offensive coordinator, how would you personally attack LSU's defense? And are there like certain areas that you would try to exploit, weaknesses, things like that?
Well, with the number of injuries, if you would have asked me this to start this season, I would have been really unsure how to answer it. I probably would have said linebackers to start the season, but the linebacker play has really improved. It's probably the most improved play on the defense as a whole. And Damone Clark, who's an absolute stud, is leading the nation in tackles. Now with the injuries, I'd probably say the secondary, which is weird because it's LSU, it's DBU. But it's second string, it's third stringers, it's guys that haven't gotten many reps. And if one of those guys go down with an injury, then you're really scrambling to try to figure that out. So I'd probably say the secondary. And the D line has had some injuries, but when I look at it now, it's still the strongest part of their defense.
And we've talked about that Alabama game quite a bit now, and I think it surprised a lot of people. And to me, at least, I feel like there's a couple of ways you can look at last week's game. I'm wondering, for your perspective, do you think that was maybe evidence that LSU's maybe turned a little bit of a corner and they're going to really go down swinging for Coach O? Or is it almost like that was their Super Bowl and a emotional letdown is almost imminent?
I hope it's not the second option, because I mean they haven't qualified for a bowl game, and I don't know. I mean, I'd have to go back and look. I mean, it's been a while since LSU hasn't qualified for a bowl game. It's been a long time, over 20 years, I think, that they've had a losing season. So yeah, there's still a lot to play for. I don't think the players want Ed to go out on a losing streak. They've lost 2 in a row now. They lost 4 of the last 5. And like I said earlier, the talent level, I mean, obviously the injuries, yes, but they still have talent across the board. And they just have to find a way to put it together, stick together. The mentality last week against Alabama seemed different. Could it have been because it was LSU Alabama and there's always, there's always a little bit more juice in those type of games? Probably, but I don't think they want to go out on a losing streak, and I do think that it would mean a lot to them to qualify for a bowl game.
And the last thing I got for you, this week, Arkansas actually opened as I think a 2.5-point favorite this weekend. It's the first time they've been favored in Death Valley since 2001, based on my research. Did that line surprise you at all? I mean, and how do you think this game plays out this weekend?
With this season, nothing surprises me, honestly. I figured it would be close. I wasn't surprised, honestly. I don't really know. Like, I'm really intrigued to see. This is one of those games that it could go either way. Honestly, I think it depends on which LSU team shows up. If the team we saw last week shows up, then I think LSU might take it. But, we've seen letdowns from them previously this season, and they play games where you think they should have it and they don't, or then they play Florida and they just run all over them. And obviously Florida is not as good as what they were thought, to be. But I think this could go either way. I think Arkansas has a really good shot in this one. And I think we'll just have to wait and see. It'll depend on which LSU team shows up, honestly.
That's kind of what I've been feeling, and even said that on the radio today. So, but again, that's all I got for you today, Julie. Thanks again for giving us some insight on the Tigers. I know all of our subscribers and people watching this are really appreciative of that. As a reminder to everyone, kickoff this weekend is scheduled for 6:30, and you can watch it on the SEC Network. And if you're watching this on YouTube right now, be sure to hit that subscribe button. That way you always get these Know the Foe segments, the press conferences, practice clips, recruiting breakdowns, and much, much more. And of course, head on over to HawgBeat.com for coverage of all things Hogs.
You're listening to the HawgBeat Hour with Andrew Hutchinson, Alex Trader, and Mason Choate on ESPN Arkansas and HitThatLine.com.
Back here on the HawgBeat Hour, last segment, we're going to talk about LSU, preview it ourselves. But before we get started, I want to give Andrew Hutchinson a chance to tell you about everything going on at HawgBeat.com. He's the managing editor, so he's the boss. He knows what's going on. And Hutch, tell him what's going on.
Yeah, what's not going on over at HawgBeat right now? It's a busy, busy time. We've got football coverage. We've got recruiting coverage with the early signing period coming up here in about a month. The busy times on the 2022 class, 2023, 2024 as well. Alex is all over that. Then we've got basketball coverage right now. Basketball season is underway. We talked about that earlier with the first win. There's some big games coming up here later this month, big event up in Kansas City. So lots and lots of stuff going on. And we've got it covered from every angle imaginable. Tons of content between the three of us. We've got Jackson Collier also contributing with basketball stuff. So lots and lots of stuff to keep you busy. If you want to ever kill some time while you're at work and make it look like you're being productive, head over to HawgBeat.com and read the stuff. Check out the message board, subscribe so you can get access to that. It's always a entertaining place. So lots of stuff to keep you busy over at HawgBeat.com.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the message board. I learn a lot on the message board, to be honest with you. I mean, sometimes that's where I find out stats that I throw into a story. So there's definitely a lot of things to do over at HawgBeat.com. So guys, Arkansas is ranked 25th in the college football playoff. I mean, does that really matter? Sam Pittman said that he's afraid that it might, get in the guys' heads, kind of like it did earlier in the year. Hutch, I mean, 25 is 25, but I mean, at the end of the day, you got to beat LSU.
Yeah, I don't think Sam's necessarily concerned that it's going to affect the team because he feels like, hey, they've been ranked before and they've fell out and now they've climbed back in. And I think they're more than anything, they're excited about it because it's good for recruiting. You can tell these kids like, hey, this is what happened. You can't really rely on these kids. And they don't remember the Bobby Petrino era when Arkansas was winning 10, 11 games in a season. That was a decade ago. These kids are, say they're 16. They were 6 years old when that was going on. So it's crazy to think about like that. But they just remember the 2-10 seasons with Chad Morris. They remember the end of the Brett Bielema era. They don't remember Arkansas being a good team. And so to have that number by your name, I think carries some weight on the recruiting trail and gets you in some houses that you probably weren't going to be able to get in if you were a bottom feeder in the SEC like they were a couple of years ago.
Yeah, speaking of those 2-10 seasons, I mean, just a couple years ago, Arkansas was working on a 2-10 season when they played LSU in Death Valley. And then you look here this year, Arkansas is 6-3, LSU's 4-5, and Arkansas is favored going into Baton Rouge. So a lot has changed since then. That was KJ Jefferson's first collegiate start against one of the greatest college football teams of all time. So it's just crazy to think about the difference in these two programs and where they are now compared to where they were last time this game was played in Death Valley. So Arkansas, 2.5-point favorite. Hutch, you've kind of talked about it a lot this week. And Alex, you can comment as well. I mean, you've been surprised that Arkansas is favored, Hutch.
I am. I'm very surprised. It's at Death Valley. Arkansas hadn't been favored down there since 2001, I believe, based on my research. That's a long time. That's 20 years ago. So it's very unusual. Arkansas is the better team. I mean, I feel like that's the case. But LSU is just coming off of a really close loss against Alabama, where they should have won. So yeah, I don't know. 2.5 points at LSU, that's very surprising, especially when you factor in the home field advantage. Usually gives you 2.5, 3 points. So Vegas sees Arkansas as at least 5 points better than LSU. That's what a time to be alive, right? No one would have guessed that whenever Sam Pittman got hired that would be the case.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, looking at it, I'm not quite as surprised just simply because I really don't see it with LSU. I might have been a year early with my take last year that they were done. Didn't have a great year last year, but this year it really kind of fell apart. And part of that is injuries. But I also think part of it is this is just two teams going in opposite directions at this point. Arkansas, we mentioned in 2019, was about as low as you can get, and LSU was riding in the top of college football history. And this season, it's really just not been similar to that at all. They have a coach that's on the way out. Arkansas has a coach that's rising up, doing a great job recruiting, and really just bringing football back into the forefront right now in Fayetteville. You've got a great basketball team, yet still midway through November, you're talking about, hey, can the football team go out and win a game on the road against the rival? I think there's something really important about that, but also I do think, Arkansas is, like Hutch said, just that much better. Factor in those 3 points. I think you could still probably favor Arkansas by 5. And there is the aspect of the rivalry. But I do think this is as good a chance as you're going to get at LSU to be able to go out there and kind of show, hey, this isn't one-sided. We're going to come in and we're going to beat you on the road every now and then as well.
The confusing thing is that, you talk about LSU being on the downfall, but they only lose by 6 points to Alabama last week, held them to 6 rushing yards. Now we know that Alabama's not your same old Alabama this year. I mean, they're still a really good football team, but something feels a little bit different about them. But still, LSU only loses by 6 to them in Tuscaloosa. So Ed Orgeron talked about how they threw new blitzes. They did some new things on defense against Alabama. Hutch, you kind of talked with Julie about how is this going to work against Arkansas too? Because they kind of, Arkansas can go back and watch the film. So is this kind of like a one-hit wonder against Alabama, where it's like, I believe she said that it was kind of their Super Bowl. They lost the Super Bowl to Alabama, but are they going to come out against Arkansas and do the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, she was telling us about how it doesn't look like they have mailed it in. So I think there's a aspect there where they're going to still come out and try. Now, are they going to be as fired up to play Arkansas as they were Alabama? Probably not. But as far as their defensive game plan, Ed Orgeron talked about it earlier this week, in that hey, we put in a bunch of stuff that Alabama had never seen, and so we were able to kind of catch them off guard. Well, now that all that stuff is on film, and Arkansas just happens to have one of the best offensive line coaches in the country as their head coach in Sam Pittman. So he feels like they're going to be able to figure it out, and it won't be quite as effective, so they might have to dial it back some. I do expect them to still blitz quite a bit, even though they didn't really blitz much the first however many games, 8 games of the season until game number 9. But we're going to see it some. But if they do it too much, you better watch out, because KJ Jefferson is prone to find Treylon Burks, and that does not go well for opposing defenses.
Yeah, I was about to ask you about KJ Jefferson and just the difference between now and the last time he played against LSU in Death Valley. Now, of course, it was his first collegiate start against that amazing LSU team, but this is a quarterback who's come a long way since then. And Ed Orgeron talked about that. Hutch, I mean, KJ Jefferson's the better quarterback in this game. We know LSU is going to run two QBs, but just kind of talk about the road that he's come on, and where he's at now compared to where he was last time he played in that stadium.
Well, the last time he played in that stadium, I guess technically his coach wasn't at the time Chad Morris, because he had been fired, but he had been coached by Chad Morris. And that's really all you need to know. That now he's being coached by Sam Pittman, Kendall Briles, guys that really know what they're doing. And plus, he's got insane talent. I never questioned the talent of KJ Jefferson. I even said it early on whenever he was a true freshman in fall camp. I said, this guy has talent. You can tell he has the raw ability, but he was just that. He was raw. And he was not polished at all. He struggled throwing the ball, and he still has some accuracy issues from time to time, but he is so much better than 2 years ago. He's so much better than even last year, whenever he kind of surprised some people, including myself, with that really, really good start against Missouri. So he's arguably he's one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC, in my opinion. I mean, there's Matt Corral. Stetson Bennett has been having a pretty good season at Georgia. Tennessee's got a good quarterback. So I feel like KJ Jefferson's right up there in the mix. He's going to be preseason All SEC next year, I firmly believe. And he's got that clutch gene. We talked about it with the end of the Mississippi State game, but he did against Ole Miss. He did against Missouri last year. So you got to feel really good if you're Arkansas about your quarterback situation, especially with him still being pretty young and room to grow.
Arkansas does feel good about their quarterback situation, but LSU does not. Max Johnson, if you look on paper, he's towards the top of the SEC in statistical categories like passing yards and passing touchdowns, but they're going to try to get Garrett Nussmeier some play time, a guy that, I mean, Ed Orgeron kind of talked about it. They didn't want to burn his red shirt without like the family's blessing or whatever, but they're going to burn it, and they're going to go kind of, I guess, I don't know if it's a true 50-50 split, but he said they're going to go with a hot hand. So What is going on with that QB situation, Alex? And do you think that Nussmeier has a real shot at, kind of giving Arkansas troubles?
Yeah, I think anytime you bring in a new quarterback that hasn't really had his shine in college football, you're in for a little bit of trouble, just because it's either going to be really great or it's going to be really, really bad for an opposing defense. I think, you hear the cliche, if you have two quarterbacks and you don't have one. I think that's oftentimes true, but you also do have guys in college more so than the NFL where, hey, if they're going to come in and they're younger, maybe they just haven't gotten their chance to develop yet. I know Julie mentioned he's a little bit more mobile, going to probably be able to kind of scramble around, but Arkansas has done fairly okay with mobile quarterbacks thus far. Matt Corral was able to get loose a little bit. And Casey Thompson got loose at the end of that Texas game, even though that's kind of a garbage time yardage stat. I do think that the defense is going to be ready. I think they've been continuing to get better every week since that Ole Miss kind of really, really poor showing. And I think, if the secondary is able to hold up their end of the bargain, I don't think that the mobility or the kind of ability to get the ball to the receivers is going to be quite there, just because there is so many injuries on that LSU offense.
Yeah, you talk about those injuries, and I want to ask Hutch about that. I mean, last year Arkansas was the one a little bit down in players with all the COVID stuff going on. They decided to play the game, but Arkansas was down players, and now you look this year, LSU. I think 13 players who have started football games are out for the Tigers. So how big is that for them? And I'm sure that gives Arkansas an advantage as well.
Yeah, it's really incredible how many guys that have been hurt for them, and not just any guys, but key guys. I mean, Keyshawn Boutte, their top receiver, was putting up just insane numbers for the first however many games of the season, is out. Derek Stingley's out. A bunch of their just top players, guys that are going to probably be high draft picks. So it definitely hurts LSU, but you can't feel too bad for them because they do have a ton of talent on that team. I mean, even with all those guys out, I was doing my side-by-side breakdown of the starting lineups, and it was still 4-star, 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 5-star, 4-star, 4-star. I mean, just it's incredible how much talent they have on that team, and really kind of goes to show why Ed Orgeron's on his way out, because there's no reason this team should be 4-5 and have lost the games that they've lost. So it helps Arkansas because those guys that are out were definitely the better players and incredible talents. But they do still have talent, and so it's just going to be a matter of how they get one coached up, especially with a couple offensive linemen this week finding out they're going to be out that start against Alabama. That could be a key thing because that's a little bit harder to fill in my opinion. But other spots, I think they're going to be okay.
Well, guys, let's get into our predictions and thoughts for the game. We broke it down pretty well, but now I want to know what you guys think, what's going to happen, players that are going to stand out, maybe some bold predictions. Hutch, we'll go ahead and start with you. You know the most, so go ahead and tell us what you think is going to happen. I'm sure you might have a few bold predictions in there as well.
Yeah, I could see this going one of two ways. I could see LSU winning a really tight, contested game because they're still, riding high, trying to win one for Coach O. But I could also see this game going completely the other direction and Arkansas winning this game rather handedly. I kind of lean toward that way. Here's a bold prediction. I could see Arkansas winning this game by 21. I really could. Just because I think there's going to be a big emotional letdown from that Alabama game. I could see Treylon Burks having a massive game. We saw him last year against Missouri go off for 200 yards receiving. We could see something like that, 200 total yards, when you factor in what he does running the ball, because it seems like they're going to do that some. And it sounds like their secondary is a little bit of a weak point for LSU. So that would be kind of my bold prediction, is just that Arkansas wins handedly with Treylon Burks having just a monster game for Arkansas.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thought that Arkansas might win by 21. For me, I think Arkansas is going to win the game. I don't have I'm trying to think of how much I think they're going to win by, but I'm going to save that. But I think for my bold prediction, I guess, Everybody's focusing on the fact that LSU held Alabama to 6 rushing yards. Well, I think that Arkansas, Dominique Johnson's going to have another 100-yard game, and I think the Hogs run for 250 plus on LSU this weekend. I really think that they're going to establish that run game, and then if they get out to that comfortable lead that Hutch, you think they might, I think they're just going to pound the rock. And so I guess that's my bold prediction. So Alex, let's go to you. What do you think is going to happen this weekend?
Yeah, I said it a little bit earlier. I think Arkansas is just a better team. I'm right with Hutch. I'm going to be careful picking a 21-point win because I did that against Auburn and it kind of backfired a little bit. But I genuinely, I think Auburn was kind of trending hot there at that point. I think LSU is doing the exact opposite. They're not playing well as of late. Outside of that one game, they had the full bye week to prepare. Like you mentioned with Julie, they blitzed more times in that game than they have all season combined. There's a reason for that. Coach O wanted one last hurrah. That hurrah was going to come against Alabama, not against Arkansas. And I think, a team that's looking for bowl eligibility, the biggest thing I'm nervous about here for the Razorbacks is the uncertainty, because what we've seen from LSU this year is not good. It has not been a great football team, but you've got the mentality of hungry dog runs faster. Arkansas just clinched their bowl game. LSU needs to win either this one or A&M, as well as Louisiana Monroe. You kind of might want to pick your spots there. I know Arkansas beat A&M, but A&M right now number 11 in the country. And you've also got the 2 quarterback system that could cause a little bit of uncertainty. I am going to roll closer to what Hutch has. I think it will be right around that 20-point margin, definitely double digits, but it could also be really close. So I don't see a way that LSU really runs away with this one and kind of just gets that crowd rocking right away. I think KJ is going to have a big day just because, those 2 corners, Eli Ricks, who stud was rumored in the transfer portal, Ohio State, Texas, all around the country last year, as well as Derek Stingley, who had that great freshman year. Both of them missing, it makes it really hard when you have a guy like Traylon Burks opposite to slow that down. So I do think Arkansas is going to roll in this one.
Well, they'll get a chance at LSU at 6:30 this Saturday on the SEC Network. It's a night game in Death Valley. That's always scary, but make sure you check it out. Thank you for listening to the HawgBeat Hour. He's been Andrew Hutchinson. He's been Alex Trader, and I've been Mason Choate. We will talk to you next week.